Welcome. It's great to see you. So I'm Rich Fernandez with the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, and my friend.
Yes, hello, I'm Peter Weng,
Yeah.
also from the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute.
So we're really happy that you've come here, and our aim is to just share everything we can about the Institute, its work, everything from teacher training to threading the needle, as you said, Peter, kind of how we bring this into different organizations, and then really open it up for you all if you have any questions. Just a little bit about myself. If you don't know my bio, I came out of Google where SIY was created. And it was really a mindfulness and emotional intelligence curriculum because at that time, engineers didn't realize they had to talk to each other. And so this was very helpful in that regard. But they really kind of came for the collaboration, but they stayed, as they say, for the well-being, the sense of connection, the sense of community, the sense of depth that really kind of comes out of this curriculum. Because this curriculum is based on neuroscience first, the platform of neuroscience, linking it with mindfulness, and eventually the outcomes being emotional intelligence. And so we've run this program literally with tens of thousands of people and organizations, got great robust data on it, and it just continues. And some years ago, we got permission from Google to spin off the curriculum as into a separate nonprofit and offer it to other organizations. And so that was 5 years ago that the Institute was founded. And so now we offer this mindfulness-based emotional intelligence curriculum to organizations around the world. And then importantly, and increasingly, our work is training and accrediting teachers who can take this curriculum for themselves and offer it as part of their coaching, consulting, business practices. If they're internal, offer it internally. And so we run several teacher training cohorts every year. Now, as of this year, it'll be on 3 continents, Asia, Europe, and North America. And we're hoping to continue to expand. So that in a nutshell is what we do. And Peter's our chief business officer. So Peter, anything to add or?
Thanks, Rich. Yes, it's so nice to be here. I thought I'd share a little bit about why I'm here, why I care about this. I noticed over my time in work that as I became more senior in work, I was becoming meaner. And it was really horrible. And I just found I was just, really demanding, and I was getting feedback on that. And it always seemed really strange to me that personally, I don't get that a lot. I do get it a little, but not a lot. And it was like seeming to get more and more off balance. And I have a long time meditation practice from Zen Buddhism. And I had let it lapse during this period. And then when I went back to my practice, interestingly enough, I think I was overzealous. And I remember later, at one point, I was so focused on trying to follow all the rules, and I was determined not to gossip at all. I remember this particular one. And I was in a performance calibration meeting. I used to run a large global organization, and the leadership team was supposed to be evaluating people's performance, and I didn't want to say anything bad about anybody. And then I realized after the meeting, I didn't do my job. I'm supposed to be able to call out positives and negatives, and I realized I had skewed too far the other way. And so to me, that was a very good personal learning for me in terms of the getting down to the right calibration. And I feel like that's something that we do as our organization, is that we calibrate very well, of trying to help people understand how to bring this work into a business environment. And so what we wanted to do today was share a little bit about that. I thought we'd just start off with a short, just minute to arrive. And so if you could just sit and find a way to allow yourself to be alert and relaxed. Take several deep breaths and settle in. With normal breathing, just notice what it's like to be here in this room. And I'd also ask you to consider, what is your intention for the last evening of Wisdom 2.0? Just think about, we're getting close to the end. What is your intention for the end? Now I'd ask you to please bring your attention back to the room, opening your eyes if you had them closed. Thank you for that. I'd actually like to do another practice very quickly. This is a practice that Weng developed of just wishing people well upon entering a room. So I'd suggest everyone just look around the room and pick two people, just any two people, and silently wish them well with your heart, and just notice what it feels like to do that. So I'd ask you now just to look around the room and just select two people and wish them well. Thank you. And do notice, what it feels like to wish someone well, and what a short practice like that feels like. This is one of the things that we try to do. We do a lot of micro practices in Search Inside Yourself. We try to have very short exercises that are very easy to do and integrate into your life so that you can help kind of foster a sense of kindness and compassion and kind of a spirit of collaboration with folks as you work. So we often start meetings with a minute to settle and consider kind of what is our intention for the meeting. And this type of practice where we encourage a short just wishing well as you get into the room. This type of micro practice, to me, the analogy of that would be like a play in sports, right? So where you have something that you repeat over and over again when the situation comes up so that you can have it kind of built in and it happens very easily. I wanted to give visuals for this, so I kind of just sprung this on Rich, that we were going to demo like our analogy, right? Yeah. So this idea of a play in sports, right? If you don't, I wanted to give an idea. It's like in basketball, a play. Like there's a certain time where something's coming up, and I give the ball to Rich, and he quickly gives it back to me, and then I shoot, right? We practice that over and over again, so that's very easy to do, and it happens automatically and very smoothly. So that would be like a micro practice. Like as soon as you come into a room, you wish somebody well, and you've practiced that over and over again. It's very quick, and it happens kind of almost automatically. Now, the thing about that is you cannot rely on these little micro practices alone. If you consider, your own practice, what if you just did micro practices only? I think you likely find that it's lacking. In addition to micro practices, you need to build your base level. You need to build the base level. The sports analogy would be strength and conditioning, right? Strength and flexibility. So that would be a dedicated practice, right? So we do long practices where we sit for a long time to raise our base level, our baseline capability, and then we have the plays to optimize when we're in a given situation. So since we demoed the play, I felt like we're going to demo this baseline strength and conditioning.
We are.
Okay. Five, on the floor, and 5. We're going to do our
Push-ups.
Push-ups.
Really?
Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's good. Ladies and gentlemen, Rich Fernandez. Yes. Silly CEO, international mindfulness leader, and fitness model. Sorry, I just wanted to give the visual. Those are we try to do those two types of things. So, as we're talking about threading the needle, how do we bring things into the workplace, which is often quite a challenging place to bring mindfulness practice into. One of the things we find is a lot of times people want super fast applicable things, right? Let me do it right now. I don't want to sit for a long time. That's really a pain, right? So the micro practices allow them to have some experience where they feel it right away. And they say, oh, I get this, I can do this right away. And then we also teach the push-ups, we teach the dedicated practices so that people understand how do they evolve over the long term, improve their kind of core capability. So that to us is one of the ways that we try to kind of thread and go right in between the two conflicting things of kind of what we feel is really important and what will resonate and allow them to get there. So a couple things, and we'd love to hear, maybe we'll do it by maybe standing in terms of who's in the room, who's kind of in a company and thinking about trying how to see how they bring this into their organization, how to bring mindfulness practice into their organization. If you could stand, that'd be great. Or that's great to see. So it's quite a lot of people, and yes, Rich and I were in that situation a couple years ago at Google. Thank you. Who is working in this field? Maybe as a coach or facilitator or mindfulness teacher, would you stand, please? Yes, a lot of folks. This is great. It's really thank you. Maybe I'd ask also, who is has had a long-term practice. Arbitrarily, I'm just going to say over 5 years of being involved in this work. Please stand. Thank you. It's a lot of longer-term practitioners, and who is fairly new, and maybe this past 6 months, this is quite a new topic. If you would stand. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. It's wonderful to see, the spread of this work, and so we just wanted to think about kind of who's here and what's interesting. I think a couple of things that we like to think about with respect to this balance of bringing this work in. There's a couple things. I was jotting some notes down of the things that I like to consider. So we just talked about this micro and dedicated, the micro practice and dedicated practice split. We also like to do a balance between theory and practice. Right? We tend to spend a lot of time on neuroscience, particularly when we were at Google. Yeah. We used to spend a lot of time on the neuroscience because the engineers would be like, oh my God, yes, the error bars in that graph, and let me think about this, and the curve fit. Yeah. And so they would get really excited about that intellectually, but what that would do is open their minds up to be willing to do the practice, which is what we really care about. Right? So we try to balance those two. A third that I was thinking about is kind of the peer and guru. I couldn't think of better words for this. But one of the things that I feel like we also try to do, and Rich and I were just talking about this the other day, is I know, at least for sure when I teach, I am no guru, right? I definitely teach, look, I've been trying to do this work in the same environment that you're in, and these are the things that I have found from this, and let me share that. And that's a very different, I think, position than, I'm coming down from on high and I have, I'm an enlightened person, I'm going to share my wisdom with you. And I think that's one of the things, one of the things we do try to do is we often have co-teachers. So I remember the first time I taught, I was very happy that I was paired with someone who had spent 10 years in the monastery, and so had a super deep practice compared to what I view as mine as my lay practice, which was really allowed for a nice contrast. So we try to have both the aspirational and also the peer type of communication. A fourth one that Rich is helping us a lot with is scale versus depth. How do you have scale to reach many, many people, because we want to really shift the way things happen in this world, but maintain the depth that's necessary, right? You need a certain depth in order to be able to have transformation. And I know one of the things we care very keenly about is that the depth means that we also include compassion practice. we do not just do concentration practices to help you with your focus, right? I really was struck. I remember when Mathieu Ricard was talking about it, how, like a sniper is mindful, right? He pays attention in the present moment without judgment, right? And he's just trying to kill people, right? And sorry, this is an aside, but I remember when I was at work and I was resuming my practice and I was just doing concentration practices, and I found it would allow me to settle down very quickly after I yelled at somebody. And so it didn't bother me that much, right? So I could actually do more damage. And so it's very, very dangerous, right? So we really care about the curriculum and the depth. And the way we balance that with scale is we have a very set curriculum. We are very strict about it, and we have an advisory council to look after it. So we try to balance those two.
Yeah, and some of the advisory council, includes people like Richie Davidson, Daniel Goleman, on the business side, Ariana Huffington. So people that really can help us navigate and, as Peter says, thread that needle, especially because we are bringing in these practices, which it's a different day than when SIY started, right? Mindfulness and compassion style practices are much more in demand because they're seen as a valid way to kind of increase wellness, performance, leadership, you name it. But it's still a real balancing act to bring this in a meaningful way, especially if you want to affect organizational culture transformation, right? And so this thing that Peter's speaking to, that we balance the mindfulness with the compassion piece, is absolutely critical. And by the way, all of our practices therefore take that form of dedicated practice, integrated practice, across those dimensions of mindfulness, empathy, compassion, cultivation. So you'll see that in our curriculum, and it is quite structured, but that's also the beauty of it, because it's kind of like a curriculum in a box. As you say, it's been validated, it's been tested, we got the data on it, and we're consistently upgrading it too, depending on what the latest research is on neuroscience or empathy or compassion. There's really compelling research in all of those areas.
And then the one last one I wanted to call out was the personal transformation versus organizational transformation. This one is actually, I feel like we actually have some more work to do on this. I think this is actually something that our whole field has work to do. We are very focused on the personal transformation aspect of it, and we feel that we can work very effectively in that way. I think the organizational level, we have kind of a tipping point view of this, is that after a certain amount, you'll get to organizational transformation. I do think there's a lot more work, again, in our fields to really make this happen and drive at an organizational level. So I wanted to call that out. But I wanted to just give a little overview of kind of where we're thinking about this, and then I wanted to just jump back into practice again, and to highlight, I've thrown out a lot of different areas. We don't really have time to cover them all, so I thought I'd just really focus in on the micro versus the dedicated practice. And so we did a very micro practice earlier of wishing well as we came in, right? 2 people. And then I thought what we would do now is that we would do a longer practice, and it would be the Just Like Me that Weng and actually Philippe Goldman helped write, or they wrote this, which is coupled with a loving kindness, a traditional loving kindness meditation. And so what we try to encourage is, daily practice to help, the daily interaction, coupled with dedicated, rigorous practice to help yourself build the long-term capacity. So for this practice, we'd like to do it as a paired practice. So we'd ask you to have a partner. It's going to be easiest, someone sitting right next to you. And so if everyone would please just select who they'd like to partner with. And yes, you can introduce yourself to your partner. If you don't have a partner, could you raise your hand? Please feel free to move. Feel free to move to find people who have their hands raised. Yes, people who have their hands raised don't have a partner. Feel free to move to get connected. So we'd like to do this as a partnered practice. Does everyone? I see. Looks like there's one person that still needs a partner. Does anyone else need a partner? Please raise your hand if you need a partner. Okay, I don't see any more hands. You know, yeah, I suppose we could do it 3 ways. Okay, great. And so it looks like everyone's had a chance to meet their partner. And now you can close your eyes. Find a way to sit that allows you to be comfortable, alert, but relaxed. Let's settle in to this. A couple deep breaths. Resuming normal breathing. Just please consider that sitting with you is another human being, just like me. Consider that this human being sitting with me has a body and a mind, just like me. And this person that I'm sitting with has feelings, emotions, and thoughts, just like me. And this person has at times felt disappointed, hurt, angry, or frustrated, just like me. And this person has experienced physical pain, just like me. And this person would like to be free of pain and suffering, just like me. This person has also experienced times of joy and happiness, just like me. This person would like to be in fulfilling relationships, just like me. This person wants to be happy, just like me. And let some wishes arise for this person. I wish that this person will have the resources to deal with the challenges and difficulties that life presents. I wish that this person will be free of pain and suffering. I wish that this person will be happy. Because this person next to me is another human being, just like me. I'd ask you now to open your eyes and look at your partner and appreciate the person sitting next to you. Silently, please.
Hugs are okay too.
I ask you to close your eyes again. And let's extend those wishes. Let's extend these wishes to everybody that's here in this room. May they be happy. May they be free from pain and suffering. May they be at peace. Let's consider our loved ones, our family, our closest friends. May they be happy. May they be free of pain and suffering. May they be at peace. Let's extend this further to our broader network of friends or colleagues. May they be happy. May they be free of pain and suffering. May they be at peace. You can consider even somebody that you may be in conflict with. May they be happy. May they be free from suffering. May they be at peace. Let's see if we can extend this further to everyone. May they be happy. May they be free from pain and suffering. May they be at peace. And let's not forget ourselves in the everyone. May I be happy. May I be free from pain and suffering. May I be at peace. Let's sit in silence for a few moments. Please bring your attention back to the room. Thank you, and I wanted to give you just a few minutes to share with your partner just anything you want, what the experience was like, or anything you'd like to share with your partner in this exercise. Basically, just to quickly wrap up, and then that way allow for extra time for Q&A, either discussion on the practice or Q&A for us.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize that this practice is the practice that we teach in the curriculum, not just like the
Great.
So how do we do that?
That's great. That'll be great. Yeah. Okay, please wrap up your conversations, please. Feel free to thank your partner. Thank you for that practice. And we just wanted to, again, share this short session with you. We were looking at both a very short micro practice, and then this is an example of the type of dedicated practice that we teach and encourage people to develop and incorporate as part of their regular life. And again, I think one of the things we care about is how do we try to hit both, the short-term need for instant gratification that comes often in the business world, and then how do we strive to do something that is more transformational and fundamentally important for the self. And so those are the ways that we try to look at both.
Yeah, and I think it's important to emphasize that the practices that you experienced here are the practices that we actually teach in organizations, right? So this wasn't an exercise in things that sort of Peter and I personally find fulfilling, which we do, but these are actually embedded in the curriculum. And so you can imagine an organization where people are practicing this type of empathy and compassion and connection. And so the idea is that and we only had a very brief time, but as Peter was pointing out, the integrated practices are framed within the context of neuroscience and also business results and the development of capabilities such as emotional intelligence that then start to hit all the things that organizations and businesses care about, like cross-functional collaboration, effective decision-making, prioritization, performance, all these things that are just kind of part and parcel of organizational life are accessed and in many ways strengthened through practice. And that these are the practices that we teach. So, we didn't have much time and we didn't have slides to show you the changes in the brain and all that cool stuff, but maybe this is a good time to just take some questions and see what's on your mind. So there's a few hands up, and Maureen's going to run a mic to you all. So we could start on this side of the room perhaps and work our way around. Yes?
As a somatic coach who's worked a lot through the body, I'm curious about bringing body-based elements into this. And if you've experimented with that and anything you want to, any wisdom around that.
Do you mean for this particular practice or just in general?
In general, in your experience, and I mean, I know that you
Yes.
started working with a lot of engineers at Google
Yes,
who have their
yes.
own issues or
Yes,
relationship
yes.
to
No,
embodiment.
No. Yes, it's a great question.
And
So,
I'm wondering how that's translated into work in other environments that might have a little different
Understood.
relationship to embodiment.
no, thank you for the question. So yes, we do have actually a whole set of body-based practices as part of our curriculum. It's actually earlier in the curriculum than this compassion practice or the meta practice. The reason that actually is very important for us. A lot of the discussion we use around the body-based practice is learning to be able to sense and read emotions more clearly and how they're manifested in the body. And so we actually spend a lot of time trying to help people with that, both for self-regulation and self-awareness.
Right. So I was curious specifically about self-regulation, like in the context of trauma, or nervous system activation in relation to mindfulness practice.
Yep.
Anything you want to say specifically about that?
Well, I think these practices, are rooted in the ability of the mind and the body to downregulate and to sort of self-manage through and be responsive rather than fully reactive. This is not a clinical application, right? So unlike other mindfulness and stress reduction types of interventions, we're not focused on sort of trauma in the workplace, but we're certainly focused on self-management. And it's the develop of the perceptual awareness of emotion as a physiological process, which it is, and the science behind that, and then the practice behind that, which is not only a seated practice, by the way, right? There's some movement, standing, walking, that then lets us access that ability to be aware and then to self-manage. And so it's woven into the curriculum, yeah. There's a few hands back.
This,
Yeah.
maybe over here. Maybe on the side, or yes.
I have two questions. My first question, the exercise we just went through, can you help us understand how is that implemented in a corporate environment? Is that like at a leadership offsite? Or I just left a 20-year career in corporate America, and I'm really... I have a long-term mindfulness practice, so I'm not resistant to it. I loved it, but I'm just really struggling with when we might have done that in my day-to-day life.
Well, part of it is when you start, like at SI-wide Google, for example, SAP, other places, it starts to develop a groundswell so that it becomes a common language around it a little bit and a common sense of practice. And what you know is what perhaps you experienced is you drop kind of down into what's not at the surface anymore, but more perhaps what's at the level of a whole person. Mm-hmm. And so when people start to see that, it's not the meetings and the offsites don't become about this agenda versus that agenda. It's about like what's underlying meaning for people. Yes, if people are cold to this, you don't just kind of say, okay, now we're going to do loving kindness and everything's going to be cool, right? Like you start to develop a culture of this, and it becomes kind of a shared language and a shared practice, and people who know how to do this. And then the other answer to that is if you haven't had the chance to do it, you do it in stealth. So especially as leaders, right? Especially if you have to have a difficult conversation, the 3 levels of a conversation, right? There's kind of the content of what's said, there's the actual emotion that evoked, but then there's the meaning, which often affects people at the level of who they are in terms of their identity and what they consider to be meaningful. And this starts to enable managers to see, what's meaningful this? Why are they reacting this way? Because and so it actually develops emotional fluency. This practice.
And maybe I'll just make a comment. This is actually tucked way in the back of our curriculum, or like in terms of sequencing. We're only doing this here. It's Wisdom 2.0. We feel like we can jump right in.
Okay, thank you.
But normally we would have a lot of setup, and so basically there's a neuroscience setup, there's a self-awareness setup, there's a self-regulation setup, and people start to it starts to be an unfolding. And so we get to the point where we can actually to bring this forward. But we were just doing this with some top-level executives at a massive German company, and it was funny. The L&D department said, "Please do not do don't do loving kindness." And And we insisted, and people said, "Oh, wow, I really felt this, and this was really helpful." So, but it does take a little bit of setup.
Okay, thank you. And just really quickly, my next question was related to your point number 4, scale versus depth. Is there a cap on a number of participants that you recommend?
There is, we tend to we've run up to like 220, but typically we'll run someplace between 60 and 70 or so is a really nice number to work with, but you can work this in a really large, like a room like this is, we've done plenty of rooms like this size and even bigger. Yeah, there's a few more questions. I think there's been an eager question over here, yes.
Sorry, which one?
The glasses first and then, yeah.
I'm just curious, have you modeled this with the remote workforce, and what does that look like?
Yes. So it's interesting. We're very strong believers in the embodiment of the teachers as an important piece of this work, and so we're actually not a huge fan of virtual. However, we have been approached. We had actually a remote workforce that came to us, and they kept coming to our programs, and they said, "Would you please help us, because all of our workers are remote?" And so we have developed a program specifically for that. They helped us develop it, and we delivered it. And interestingly enough, the results look very, very good. They look very basically comparable to our live programs. We're still kind of old school, so we haven't shifted to that as a standard, anything that we're doing standard, but it is something that we do. Yes.
You've kind of alluded to some things that would help, but for companies that just are looking at rapid growth, embracing growth mindset with not only a staff that's growing rapidly, but the idea that you're trying to tackle busyness versus productivity. And we did implement a mindfulness program, but it's one of those things where it's, what is it, horse to water, so it's, I'm trying to get that group of like internal evangelists that will feel the benefits, but you're trying to convince people that think they don't have 5 minutes to give themselves to breathe. Yeah. If you could just give me like a magical sentence to help me get those evangelists.
Useful mental
awesome.
habits to deal with hypergrowth. Useful mental habits that will help you deal with hypergrowth. So basically, the myth is that this takes a lot of time to sit down and just meditate, right? And so we distinguish that by providing these useful mental habits. And a good example is this skill that we developed called response flexibility, right? You could run around with your head on fire, or you can distinguish what's urgent from important using the skills of attention and awareness, i.e. mindfulness. We don't necessarily say that, to be response flexible. And that really, especially in hyper-growth, rocket ship types environment, really help.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we only have like a minute left apparently, so let's, there's a few questions in the back, so let's just take one or two and then we'll have to wrap. And we also have a table in the village, so, and we have like quite a number of our staff members there if you want to like learn more. And, Yes?
Yeah, I've spoken briefly about this with our CEO, and he's very negative against it. He just says, I tried to meditate, I just can't.
Yeah.
I don't know how to respond to that.
Well, sometimes it's two things. One is can't push the boulder up the hill, right? So sometimes organizations aren't ready. Organizational readiness, leadership readiness isn't there. Not a popular answer, right? So the other way to think about it is really similar to the question I just answered over here, is what matters most to that person? And do any of these skills, which are pretty foundational skills in terms of effectively working together, right, and managing one's own experience around stress and wellness and performance, if any of that matters, then finding a way to language it, right? So is it about developing tools for sustainable high performance? That could be one angle, right? And so the language is really critical. At Google, we never used to call it mindfulness in the beginning. What did we call it? Like neural self-hacking, right? And before we could call it mindfulness. And then I remember I was presenting some of this to Facebook, similar thing, and they have like what do they call this? It's just code optimization, right? And so code refactoring, right? And so basically they're like, why should we do this? I said, because it's a way to refactor your mental faculties. And they were like, oh, damn, I got to get some of that, you know? So it's just a lot of it has to do with positioning. Okay, and one last question, and then
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of times validation and results being comparable, and I'm just wondering what you're measuring.
Yes, so we have indices that range from well-being, from conflict, from communication effectiveness, on, it's stress, ability to focus and distractibility. And we do pre-posts roughly 4 months out. We also have case studies that take it 6 months out. And we usually see often double-digit changes. Right now, self-reported. And we're also now starting to do some original research using 360 or multi-rater on those same dimensions. Yeah, okay, one more if we do, yeah. You're the timekeeper, so I trust.
Okay, great. Real quick, I'm actually a corporate psychologist, and I've been doing this work for over 40 years. Just a quick response there, okay? This is just my own experience because I get that all the time. Oh, they're not open to it. Even from famous psychologists. I think a lot of it has to do with you and how you show up. Because I've got mean litigators, law firms with the kind of thing. And once they begin to trust me, they're more open to it. So that's just one quick comment, but I could talk more about it. The other comment that I wanted to make is doing this work, for so long, personally, I don't think it's sufficient enough, and I do all this work just to work individually. What I learned 40 years ago...
Sorry, just do what?
To just work individually with the person, okay? And I do that work as well, executive coaching and so forth. I absolutely believe you also have to change the system. I talked to several people from Google here. They're totally stressed out, and they're here, and they're doing the mindfulness. So unless you change the corporate culture, the leadership, anyway, I can go on and on about this. You have to do that as well. Otherwise, my belief is it's not enough. So I'd be curious what your thoughts about that might be. Yes,
I too am a corporate psychologist. So I agree that organizations, you have people on both sides of that equation, right? So maybe you met some folks who are pretty stressed out. We also put over, is it 3 or 4, how many thousands of people at Google through SIY every year? It's at least 3,000.
Yeah,
Same with SAP.
3 to 5, yeah.
I think it's more like 5,000. That's not nothing, right? And those people now have life skills and tools. Has the culture significantly changed? Maybe, maybe not. It is still one of the best places to work. Last I checked, year over year, perhaps the best place to work most consistently. So, I'm not entirely sure that I would opine that, it's kind of where that it's as dire as that. But I agree with the underlying point that organizational transformation, culture transformation is really what this is about. So I'm completely aligned with you on that. And I think that if we can build a groundswell, which is our point, and our sweet spot is training teachers, right? So we train teachers to go to their organizations. We train trainers within organizations. Right now, there's about 20 Google employees who are going through our teacher training and 24 SAP employees who are going through our teacher training, in addition to the 24 that are already SAP, right? And so they run like well over 100 of these every year. Again, to the earlier question, it starts to develop a common vocabulary, a common way to kind of understand and approach things. It gives people a set of tools.
And I was just going to comment, I think I underplayed it a little bit. We do work with entire organizations from the CEO all the way through and working through the layers to work on that. However, I don't feel like it's universal. That's not all of our engagements. We definitely have engagements that are very programmatic, strict programs. And so that's why I feel like that is the new and the next frontier, I feel, for us as an industry to really move forward to tackling organizational level change consistently. That's one thing that I would hope that we all aspire to.
So I think we're at time, so thank you for your attention. We'll be around in the village. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.